platform. Thank you for joining our executive panel, where we'll be chatting today about the most important CloudOps and cybersecurity concerns that CISOs, CTOs, and other enterprise technology leaders have at the top of their minds in this new year. I am super excited for our panel today. We're joined by two highly accomplished experts in the cloud infrastructure and security operations arena. First, I want to introduce one of the Blink co-founders, Haviv Rosh. Blink is the CTO of BlinkOps, and he was the former global chief architect for ServiceNow applications. Haviv oversaw teams of hundreds of cloud, security, and infrastructure developers around the world, and he joined ServiceNow when they acquired Nebula Systems, where he was the VP of R&D, responsible for architecting Nebula Service Watch, which ultimately became the core ServiceNow ITOM business unit. So welcome, Haviv. And I also want to welcome our next guest, Sarbjeet Johal. You may recognize Sarbjeet from social media or from his many videos and interviews sharing opinions on infrastructure and cloud economics. Sarbjeet Johal has been a technology leader for industry giants like Oracle, Rackspace, VMware, Dell EMC, and Visa. First things first, hi, Sarbjeet. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I've been around for a while in tech, about 26, 27 years now. I started doing in 95 and wrote a lot of code in the beginning of my career, and then moved into the ops area since I joined EMC. And there are a couple of company names we didn't mention in the intro, but that's fine. So the key is what I'm working on these days is that for the last 10, 11 years, I have been working in the cloud sphere, if you will. Since I was at VMware, I was there when we launched vCloud Director, and I was at Rackspace when we open sourced the OpenStack, and I worked at Oracle Cloud as well. That was my second tenure at Oracle. So I think deep about these things, and for the last 5 years, I have focused more at the industry level, not at the vendor level. So I give a lot of talks and I do my own research. I work as kind of as analyst for the industry. The things I'm working on for last, especially a year or 18 months or so, is that I'm focusing on the practitioner side a lot more, and then I work with the execs to understand their needs and try to weave in what the technology providers are doing, and the sort of marrying those two and where the gaps are, and talk a lot about that. I've introduced few new terms to the industry like skills gravity and feature proximity, and which we will talk about in a few minutes. So hopefully I can mention those things at a relevant sort of point during our discussion. Yeah, I talk about CloudOps and DevOps and DevSecOps and just SecOps as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Sorry, it's a long explanation to your question.
Well, thank you for introducing yourself, Sarbjeet, and we're excited to have you, and we can dive into some of these topics that I know are kind of front of mind for CISOs and CTOs in the industry this year. Next, I wanted to introduce Haviv Rosh, who, as I mentioned, is the co-founder and CTO at BlinkOps. Haviv, would you mind sharing a little bit about what the team is building at BlinkOps, and how we came to talk about CloudOps today?
Yeah, so nice to meet you all. So as you mentioned, I came from ServiceNow. Was there the VP R&D for the ITOM business unit. So practically all the operation products for ServiceNow, and then became the global chief architect of the company. And prior to that, there was VP R&D for Nebula Systems, who did also a solution in the monitoring and discovery space around service mapping, also in the operation space. So I've been there in this space for a long time. And actually 2 years ago, we started, Gil, Sion, and myself, they actually sold the company in the security space to Palo Alto. And together we started BlinkOps, which is a low-code, no-code platform for security and cloud operation teams. And basically trying to implement all the lessons learned from ServiceNow and previous companies, and how to adjust those kind of lessons I've learned in the IT space and operations space to the modern space that we'll talk about it in a minute. So we are a team of around 50 people located in Israel, building the next kind of platform for local no-code for platform and security.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that initial introduction. I was hoping that we could dive a little bit more into your founder journey, Haviv. Before we get into predictions about 2023, I'm really curious what your observations were as the global chief architect at ServiceNow for 7 years. What was the opportunity that you saw in the market that caused you to leave ServiceNow and become a founder of BlinkOps?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. Why should I leave ServiceNow? It was a rocket ship, actually. So as most of you know, ServiceNow is actually the standard when it comes to IT operation. So many products around ITSM, ITOM. So during the time that I was a VP R&D, global chief architect, I had lots of conversation with customers, and actually observed how ServiceNow was able to leverage its low-code, no-code platform to completely transform the IT industry and quickly becoming the gold standard for management platform for centralized IT teams. But if you look at the past several years, there have been notable or major shift in how software is actually being built, deployed, managed, secured, and those kind of paradigms are no longer valid, in my opinion. So first is the move to the cloud. Everyone is moving to the cloud. New software is building using new technologies like Kubernetes, microservices on Amazon or GCP on Azure. No more kind of on-prem, solely on-prem kind of application. In addition, applications are becoming much more distributed along because, again, because of microservices. So it's a lot harder to manage them and understand the overall state of the system and operate them. It's a lot more complex than managing a monolith, right? And then the other thing is that the number of tools that are involved in developing, managing, operating, securing all those kind of tools, all those kind of application is enormous, right? So you need a tool for monitoring, you need a tool for source control, for on-call, et cetera, et cetera. There are practically more than 20 tools actually operate a single kind of application. And most of them are actually silos and disconnected. And you actually need to stitch them together. And the last important thing is that something that I mentioned, that I saw, is the shift from a centralized IT team that handles all the day-to-day operation, NOC, to a more distributed, decentralized teams that are actually working together to build, manage, deploy, monitor their own kind of solution. In the notion of you build it, you run it approach. So the legacy kind of legacy solutions that are more centralized are no longer relevant in this modern world. But if you look at the problems that ServiceNow tried to solve within the IT space, they are the same. Like, how do you operate at scale? How do you make how do you create an abstraction layer for operation and best practices and workflows around the different teams that are handling those automations? And nowadays, there isn't the ServiceNow version for cloud operation. Instead, every team needs to invent their own kind of thing. There isn't first any abstraction layer for cloud operation, like consuming or exposing best practices and out-of-the-box kind of processes. Team needs to write their own kind of using scripts that are unmanaged, like governance. They need to reinvent the wheels and reinvent those kind of automation and best practices instead of using out-of-the-box like automations and flows and workflows that some expert actually wrote for them and create for them. The other thing that I've seen that is that developer wants to be self-sufficient. They don't want to actually create or ask for certain things from DevOps team or central team in a very manual way. They just need something that is a self-service experience that they can actually via Slack, via Teams, open something, ask for something, and then boom, it's created for them. So this is why, and most of the legacy solutions out there weren't built for teams, right? They were built for central, one big kind of team, like IT team. And this is why a true no-code, low-code platform is missing for cloud and security operation. And that's what Blink is about and is solving, being the system of action for modern security and DevOps team, allowing them this kind of bridge the gap and providing them this out-of-the-box best practices, use cases, etc., on top of our platform.
So Sarbjeet, I'd love for you to share your thoughts on Haviv's observations. It sounds like we're kind of at a transition point between centralized IT and really distributed cloud operations. Based on your conversations with enterprise leaders, what are the biggest operational challenges that enterprise leaders and their teams are facing in the cloud era?
The challenges actually, they have wide spectrum of challenges. It starts from the migration sort of stage of the cloud, like when you're migrating to the cloud, from that point, then you move to the cloud. When you're in the cloud, how you're operating there, because the operations in the cloud look a lot different than the operations on-prem, what you are used to doing in past, right? So the roles change, like who does what changes, right? Who addresses the support ticket and who is fixing that problem, in who is responsible for security, because security is a shared model, as we know, in cloud. Um, it just varies at all levels. Yes, I totally agree with Habib that the applications are becoming micro in nature. I usually say it's an age of micro consumption. We are miniaturizing the software side as well as hardware side, right? If the chips are shrinking, our software packages are shrinking as well. And what that does is poses a lot more challenge to stitch these things together, as Habib said, right? So having mechanisms to control that sort of mess, if you will, is the need of the hour, if you will. The simplification of operations is people are crying out loud for that. So we hear that all the time, that we need to make things less complex. Just look at the number of services provided by the top three cloud providers. Um, there's all, of course, there's a lot of overlap and they do similar things. But if you go to the top one, they have 250 to 300 number of services. Like, how do you make sense of that? How do you learn that? How will you scale your people to consume that? So I usually talk about the skills gravity. Like when you learn certain technologies from certain cloud providers, those skills have gravity. But then you do an M&A, or you have to use another cloud for whatever reason, you have to train people on that. So it creates a lot of friction and a lot of disparity between teams as well. Like one team is there are like 5 different ways, for example, to consume just containers on AWS, right? If not more, at least 5. So they have these different flavors of which one you pick and all that. So we have to simplify these things by having a platform between the cloud providers and your operations, and those tools are needed. And I was a big fan of HashiCorp earlier. Then they are getting a little bit sidetracked, to be honest with you. Maybe I shouldn't mention the names of the vendors, but I, as an analyst, I am picking the names to make my points here, just to make sure. So if you want to give the APIs to people to stitch up their own sort of recipes, if you will, for infrastructure, that is flexible, but that's very cumbersome task. That's infrastructure as code, right? Um, it there's a huge learning curve, and you have to upkeep those repos. And once the infrastructure becomes code, actually, then you inherit the problems that we have faced in the software world, like backward compatibility and managing the repos, and make sure the security of your source code is intact. Like, you need to know where these libs are coming from. Are you using open source? Are you using proprietary software? How do you stitch that up, right? So there's a lot which is thrown at the operations these days. We are asking operations to become coders, and not only coders, but coders of many different sort of platforms, if you will. We need an abstraction layer to simplify. I will say, if not all of it, at least like 50-60% of that should be sort of more like cookie cutter approach, which works and everybody does that. It's not a differentiating service for you. If you're Ford, you're competing with GM by doing, spinning up the containers in a different way is not going to differentiate you, believe me. But you have to go above that, where you can write the differentiating software. So I'll stop there. I can go on and on about these things. Yeah.
I think that's a great point to transition. So we've covered a little bit about our current cloud native landscape and how we got to where we are today. I'd like to take this as an opportunity to transition to some of the consequences of those developments over the last 5 or 10 years. Sarbjeet, while you're answering, what are some of the trends that you're hearing CTOs and CISOs discuss in the context of this kind of hyper-fragmented cloud operations landscape? What are technology leaders looking to change about their cloud operations in 2023 to position themselves better for success?
Yeah, with the number one thing is that with the sort of economic downturn or the rising rates, so like things are slowing down, and we are all leaders. I hear them talking about cutting the cost and are trying to do more with less. When we talk about cutting the cost, that sort of narrative has been in the market for last like 18 months to 24 months or so. We know that in systems where like there's a one sort of theory or one mechanism that whatever is the cheapest, you waste that a lot. It's a trick as well. So you can afford to waste the cheapest resource to gain somewhere else, to gain efficiency and or speed, somewhere else in the system. And people thought that compute is cheap because it's in micro chunks, and you feel like you're not spending too much at per VM or per a call to the serverless world in that sort of scenario. But things add up, right? So we used to have the VM sprawl, right? Remember in the virtualization days? Now we have a problem of cloud sprawl for the last few years. Like people are spinning up, these instances, and they're sitting there, and people are paying the bills. And cloud providers have done some. They have done a good job of trying to warn you if things are like we're getting wasted. They kind of work on your behalf as well. To, hey, lower the cost here. You can do this, that, here, and that there. But they fall short of on many fronts, because there's only so much they can understand about your operations, right? So that's one thing. So economics of cloud, and then that caused the rise of FinOps, right? FinOps, it sort of sounds like a financial markets thing, but FinOps term we are using to create a discipline in the, especially in the cloud sort of consumption side, to lower the cost by addressing different sort of mechanisms, like how we can lower the cost. We can double click into that some other time. The automation, we are not slowing down on automation, even though the economy is slowing down. So automation is our sort of solution to cut the cost, right? So we can't afford to throw bodies at these problems. We need to throw automation at these problems. That's very important, and most of the leaders understand that. And what else? There's a lot of talk about how AI will help in the operations as well. That's another observation, but it's a very can't say long shot. It's a very slow moving train, if you will. We will be viewing AI or ML to start with, and then better AI models in our operations. We have been using that in some of the security tooling vendors have been using that to train. We used to do that, training the firewalls, like run the stuff openly and then it trains your firewalls. We are taking it to the next levels, if you will. So the AI, the introduction of AI into our ops is what people are interested in, how it can help. Vendor rationalization is a overall theme which I hear all the time. So there are so many vendors a typical enterprise has to deal with on the sort of technology side, on the services side, on the just if you take the security, that's in the security sphere, there's so many vendors, right? It's very scattered kind of market. I think the top so first number one vendor in security has less than 5% of the market share. So it's so much like breadth of the tooling from the vendors, and CIOs and CTOs, they're struggling with that. So rationalization of the technology suppliers is another trend I'm seeing. Yep.
Awesome. Well, Haviv, Sarbjeet mentioned a few times both the complexity of the current landscape, but also ways that automation is starting to simplify that, or at least that leaders are looking to automation to simplify their own operations. I was wondering if you could share how you see the no-code automation landscape developing this year. What are the killer features or capabilities that enterprise executives are most excited about when they're considering no-code automation? And what do you think have been the barriers getting to no-code adoption before today? Why is 2023 really a year that no-code automation will become more prominent in the cloud operations space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we touched upon that, but I think this year is going to be very interesting for the no-code landscape, simply because of the few of the next kind of things like the global economy headwinds, right? We're all seeing that. The widening skill gaps that we have. It's super hard to find, a good DevOps or a good platform engineer or a good security operation kind of engineer. And to add on that, the rising operational optimization demands. So organization this year needs to do more with less. So you cannot throw people at problems anymore, at least for the next year. So a platform for no code, low code is something, automation that is something that every organization needs to consider seriously nowadays to reduce the cost and to do things in a more repeatable way, with governance and control and all that, instead of those one-offs that until now, DevOps teams or platform teams were able to actually throw people at it, to code it, to spin up servers, et cetera, which for a larger organization, especially with nowadays, with the global economy headwinds, it's no longer, I think, a viable option. Now, when you talk about low code versus no code at all, there are major differences between them, and I'll briefly expand about it because there are lots of tools out there. So it's important to understand what is a true no code. When we say true no code, what we mean. So a code-based application is something obviously that you write in any programming language. You need to spin up a server, and et cetera, et cetera. A low code is something that you stitch, the overall kind of program together, but the actions themselves, they're coded in Python or JavaScript. So you still need to have some kind of a developer that thinks like in programming kind of way of thinking to actually orchestrate and build those automations. So you need a coder for that. A no-code platform, true no-code platform, is something that you can actually take out of the box. It covers a solution, predefined solution, like finding orphan resources in Amazon and shutting down with approval. This is a predefined use case that you can actually implement in no-code and then tune it and configure it and extend it. So that's actually, in my opinion, the true no-code, something that is solving a use case end to end and you can start immediately using it without any tweaking or adding. So it's not a template, it's actually a solution that it's working. So my way of thinking is that we need to introduce a ready-to-use automations around cost, compliance, incident response, security, etc., that every organization can actually take and start using immediately. Now, the lucky thing here is that when using cloud, these are repeatable kind of solutions that you can actually build repeatable solution for them. It's not in on-prem, everyone had to configure and change and do their own kind of thing. With cloud, it's like, you know, resources in Amazon or resources in Amazon. So you can actually create the repeatability there. So that's one thing. The other one is like taking best practices implementation, like think ITIL for the IT space, right? There are like AWS well-architected best practices. So we need to actually take those and implement them and provide them as a solution that an organization can say, I want to actually act according to AWS well-architected. I'm just taking this solution from this provider, from no-code provider, and boom, I can actually you know, be compliant and be according to the AWS well-architected. So the first point is out of the box, ready to use automation, zero or near to zero kind of touch and configuration, et cetera, et cetera. The second one is the need for specialized no-code platform for cloud and security. If you look at other verticals, like you have Monday for project management, HubSpot for marketing, ClickUp for, again, agile, Zapier for connecting tools. We need the same kind of ease of use, consumer-based experience when it comes to cloud platform and cloud security by providing this platform that allows you to do that, right? We don't need to wait. We would like to get this consumer-based kind of experience as well. And the last thing that I think is super important is take those manual business processes and cross-team silos processes that exist in every organization and replace them by no-code automation that are stitching the flows between the different parties. So it could be self-service and approval flows. Someone is asking from the dev team, request for permission, it goes to the security team, go through approval, open a ticket in Jira, and then there is a provisioning or changing the request, giving the developer the right permission and credentials and closing the loop without any manual intervention, right? Everything is super automatic. That's actually increase the overall experience, productivity, it reduces toll, and of course saves time and money. So these are the main three things that I think every organization needs to look for this year actually.
So I wanted to keep pulling on the no-code automation thread and specifically dive a little bit deeper into security automation. 2022 saw some of the most expensive breaches and leaks in really the history of our industry. And so obviously, as cost is a major concern for businesses, so is vulnerability and risk associated with security breaches and other security practices. Haviv, how do you anticipate no-code automation will shape the enterprise security landscape in the new year? And how do you think CISOs are thinking about no-code security? What are the use cases you foresee being automated specifically in the security operations space?
Yeah. So there are lots of interesting use cases when it comes to automation for security, but I want to focus maybe, or the interesting use cases for me are the ones that have cross-team impact and they actually streamline work across the organization between different teams, right? You know, there are lots of products out there that they can actually automate specific kind of action when alert happens, do X, Y, Z. But actually, what is most interesting is taking those automations and shifting them left. And I'll explain in a minute and give some examples. So the actual developers, the team can actually remediate that without the need to manual intervention. So that's bridging the gap and doing some cross-team impact and streamline the work between the teams. So let's take a simple kind of example with vulnerability management. Let's say your tool is detecting vulnerability, and now it triggers an automation in the low-code, no-code platform, which actually finds the team or even the person that introduced the change. Let's say the vulnerability was around someone has changed my Terraform or creating resources with different kind of parameters, and then it exposed it publicly by mistake. So an automation, a low-code automation platform can actually detect that, find the right team that introduced the change, or even the person, Slack him, send him a Slack message or a team message, ask him to change or remediate the issue, or even suggest him options how to remediate the issue. All he needs to do is actually click on a button. Yes, I want to remediate, and here are the solutions. And in addition, notify the security team, create the relevant tickets in ServiceNow or elsewhere for auditing, and then closing all the loops. So that's actually bringing together 3-4 different teams, right? Without this manual kind of intervention, and it's shortened the time, create a better self-experience, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just one example. Another example is inside risk and threats. So think about it. Every day, developers are sharing tokens and passwords in Slack, right? Hey, what's the password for GitHub, or what's the password for this server? Hey, take it. This is the boom, adds it to Slack. So what if we can actually scan all those Slack channel and find all those tokens and passwords that are shared in Slack, remove them from Slack and replace them with a link to a secret manager, move the secret that was exposed to a secret manager, now it's safe, and place instead in the Slack message a link to the secret manager, and also notify the security team, notify the person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's another example. Again, bridging between different teams and shortening the cycle to actually remediate and solve the issue. Because nowadays, there is someone that is going over all vulnerability, needs to locate the team, needs to access them, needs to follow up on them. It's super, super manual. So with low-code automation platform, we can actually bridge on that. Same again for documents. Let's say in Drive or in Office 365 that someone mistakenly exposed, like there is a sales projection PowerPoint that by mistake I actually open it and now it's public. So find out about that, locate again the person that actually mistakenly opened it to the cloud, and then offer him, ask him a question. Hey, did you intend actually to open it to the cloud? Do you wanna block it? If yes, click here. If not, I will remind you again in a week. If you don't longer need that access, I will automatically revoke it. Again, make it shift left instead of involving a lot of person that actually scans and all that. And it goes with self-service. That's one of my favorite. I'm as a developer, I want to ask for permission. I want to ask for temporary permission for production system. I don't want to create tickets in Jira and follow up on them. Just want to, via Slack, open a self-service request. Behind the scene, there is an automation that gives me the access, notify the security team, revoke the access within 2 hours. Let's say it's an access to production, and boom, my self-experience is high because I'm a developer. I don't want to talk to anyone. And I get out of the box this behavior, and it goes and goes, with the CSPM alerts that can be remediated automatically, suspicious activity detected. Let's say someone in Okta, we got an alert from Okta about suspicious activity. You can ask the user, hey, did you actually do this kind of thing? Did you log in, or did you share your password? If not, you can block his account or drill down and do further kind of activities. So again, doing this automation, but connecting the different teams and shift left and being super interactive with the response, shorten the time to remediate. Yeah.
Thank you, Haviv. I was going to say, I hope our audience now has a better understanding of some of the use cases you might want to think about when considering no-code automation. We're already starting to see some audience questions, and so I don't want to hang on too long with our panel questions. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask one final question for each of our panelists, and then open it up to the audience Q&A. Because the theme of this webinar is predictions for 2023, Sarbjeet, I was hoping we could start to you. Do you have a bold prediction for cloud operations and security in 2023 that you might want to share with our audience?
My boldest prediction is that AI will take the center stage by the end of the year. I'm not kind of predictions kind of guy, to be honest with you. I think when we were prepping for this, I said that because these things are continuous, ongoing things, but we will double down on the automation and the use of AI as we progress throughout the year. So by the end of the year, we'll be like, yeah, we can do more with less. And in that context, so my bold prediction is that we will use a lot more AI and ML in our ops, and we'll do a lot more automation by using AI and ML as well. Just because AI and ML can just help the personnel as well, okay, just by warning through Slack and other means, right, wherever these eyeballs are. But the trick is to do that autonomously, so people don't have to intervene, but it takes care of things. And while it's keeping people informed, right? There's a RACI matrix, we talk about that, like who does what when, and who is responsible, who needs to be informed. So we need to weave that into our platforms, I believe. So that's one thing. And while Haviv was talking, actually, I wanted to make it a little more interactive, but I let him just go on a little longer. My thinking is that the two terms I always say that at individual level, as at system level, at company level, which are very important to remember. That's leverage and proximity. You want to leverage what you have already done. You want to leverage what your partners have already done. You want to leverage what your vendors have already done. They have spent a lot of money by putting a lot of thought into the automation of the system on the back end. Cloud is actually, when I talk about cloud, it's like cloud is nothing but industrialization of infrastructure. Cloud, like IT infrastructure. If you think about that, that's what it is, right? So, but that industrialization on the back end now is making us, like, there are hiccups on the consumption side now. We need to do the sort of industrialization on the consumer side now. So these tools, which are low code, no code tools, which they will sit between the end consumer of the cloud, which is mainly developer and operations teams. They need to sit between the cloud provider and these end users of the cloud. So that's how I see it. So the proximity, I talked about the leverage. You want to leverage things. But proximity is that the few vendors, that the only few vendors can interact with the cloud providers at a deeper level. That's their bread and butter. They will understand their all incoming APIs, and the 5 new features were launched last week by AWS, and they will weave that into their platform. So you don't have to learn that at that sort of lowest level, if you will, as an enterprise. So those are the 2 points I want to make. Another point I wanted to make during our discussion today, which I will make it here, is that not all enterprises have same kind of practices or same level of automation. They cannot afford that. That's for sure. Some people will use more automation and some people will use less automation. And the only place you should use less automation or less low code, no code tooling is if you are an ISV, you are trying to shave off the sort of milliseconds from the performance, or you want to go to the lowest level of the APIs, and then you want to muck around with that if you're building tools, if you will, right? But if you're operating your data center and or in cloud using these cloud services and or private cloud services as well, hybrid cloud, multiple clouds, you don't want to sort of muck around with the lower level APIs and all that, even though your developers will run there, because developers are, they want to be on the cutting edge, they want to play with the code and all that, they want to cook everything, they want to polish their resume as well. I hate to say that, but operations have to keep that control to a certain extent, while giving these developers on both sides, application developers as well as operations related developers, because we have dev in the operations as well, give them some freedom to bypass these automated tools. But I will say 70 to 80% should be more standardized and more in control. So now you can repeat your question. Did I cover that?
I think you did, and I'll extend the same question to Haviv. It sounds like Sarbjeet believes automation AI will help improve the experience for both developers and operations practitioners over the course of 2023. And so I'd like to extend that question to you as well, Haviv. What's your controversial opinion about where cloud infrastructure and the security landscape is going in 2023?
Yeah, I think with regards to automation, traditionally, the problem or the headwind was always how hard it is to configure, to change. Do you need to be a developer to actually do that? And I think the two prediction I have is with regards to that. So we've seen a major kind of improvements with regards to AI. So I think that no code infused with AI, that actually will create a productivity boost. So, and we're actually working on it on our platform as well. So think about it that you can actually describe in plain English the use case and what you want to achieve. Like, I want to detect certain resources in Amazon and clean them, or notify via Slack, and then after approval, clean them, et cetera, et cetera. Those AI tools can actually generate for you the automation, the no-code automation, because they know the syntax, they know how it works. It's actually much easier than generating code. So it will give you, like, I don't know, 80% of the solution that you can actually start using. So think about how huge it could be, because you just need to express in plain English what you're trying to avoid, and then fill in maybe the gaps and tweak it and test it. That's a huge kind of ROI and faster time to get to right automations. That's one thing. I think the other one, which is also related to that, so provide out of the box no-code solutions instead of templates and automation that now every vendor needs to configure and change and tweak and build. If you can provide a library of reusable kind of use cases or solutions that every company is facing when it moves to the cloud, and there are lots of repeatable kind of best practices. If you can supply that, provide that, so companies can actually, in a click of a button, can start using it immediately on their platform. And it actually, behind the scenes, it's the implementation would be as if, like, I don't know, Google wrote that, because it's like super professional, super working good, covers all the angles. Imagine, the cost, the time that you'll save, that's A, and the level of professionalism that you can get to manage your cloud, because some of the best experts actually wrote it for you.
Yeah, I spot on, Haviv. one sort of thinking frame I have for last 3-4 months is that innovation favors scale. I mean, if you think about that, that's so true. So you can innovate a lot more things if you have certain scale, and if you have like smaller scale, you want to leverage the innovation provided by people who have done it at the higher scale. So you want to leverage those specialists which are hired by these number one cloud providers, and number two is the ISVs who sit between cloud providers and you as an enterprise. So you want to leverage the innovation coming through these channels. So spot on.
Awesome. So we're coming across the top of the hour, and so I want to make sure that we address one of the audience questions that we've gotten. And I want to turn this one first to you, Haviv, but I actually would like to hear the answer from both of you. Haviv, there are lots of different automation platforms and low-code capabilities that are available to enterprises today. And many enterprises have already adopted tools that have some maybe low-code features involved. How do you recommend technology leaders like CIOs or CISOs understand the capabilities and select standards when it comes to no-code automation? As a technology leader yourself, how do you evaluate no-code platforms and what are you looking for?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there are lots of low-code platforms that are not specifically specialized for cloud operation and security operation. And I gave a few of the examples. I think one thing is to look at the existing kind of low-code platform that the organization is using. Is it a project management kind of tool, or is it an IT related tool? Because not all the different tools can actually solve the same problem. A, they don't have the integration. B, they don't have the use cases supported. B, they are not architected in a way that allows them to actually interact with cloud resources that maybe are sitting behind VPCs and all those kind of things. So there are lots of technical and non-technical kind of aspects. And I think the other very important thing is the level of integration. Not all the different low-code platform has the right integration when it comes to cloud, right? So for cloud, you need integration with, of course, all the vendors, but with Kubernetes, with the Docker, with Terraform, with the tools that actually DevOps and security operations are handling day to day. So you need to take all those into account. And as I said before, I think this year we have to see a specialized low-code, no-code platform for cloud operation and security.
Sarbjeet, I'll turn the same question to you. And specifically, you mentioned leverage. How are CIOs and CISOs supposed to leverage the investments in the tools they already have when they're thinking about no-code automation?
Yeah, I think leveraging the two investments they have made in the tools is a double-edged sword. Like sometimes like we keep using the existing tools or the older technology because we have made the investment in that. So I will rather challenge that assumption that I think we need to go to the newer set of tools. But Isaac's question, by the way, Isaac is not an ordinary human being, according to me. He's an author of 2 books, Driving Digital and Digital Trailblazer. That's his last book. He's a good friend of mine, and he is an expert in DevOps and DevSecOps, and he's a very sought after individual. Like people hire him for fixing these disciplines, if you will. So his question is very relevant. How do you pick the right vendors or right tools? And this is the gripe I have for last 25 years or so. When I was working with Siemens in Germany on a big project, it was 18 months long project we were doing, going from US. I was working at Commerce One at that point. They needed to build a supplier rating system. So what we don't have in our systems is in technology stacks is that there's no supplier rating system. There's no way to tell like, okay, if this low code, no code vendor is better than the other one, right? Um, in the absence of that, I believe there are a couple of things we can focus on. I can stretch my mind offline and get back to him and tweet and send some information to you guys as well. That the two things coming to my mind are, number one is the look at the vendors which adhere to some sort of standards, right? So they are either promoting standards or they're using some sort of standard, and there's consistency in their sort of the way they do things. That's number one. Number two is that how much education they are putting out there, how much involved they are with the community. Are they building a community of folks who will practice this discipline, or you have to, every time you need to do something, you have to go back to them and go, how do I do this, how do I do that, right? So I actually say that to the technology providers, people who build these tools, low code, no code, or any other technology, that to outcompete your competition, you have to out educate the market. So education is important. So as a consumer, you want to know how much education they have put out there. The third thing is the team. I think team is very important. It's easy to see these days, like who is working at this company and what they have done in the past. It's very important to know the team, because sometimes you can bog down into the wrong paths and pick some technology which is oversold by doing clever marketing or something. So you want to make sure the people who have done these kind of things from the past, and they understand the problem domain at very depth level. So yeah, if somebody actually understand your problem better than you do, they have a solution to your problem most of the time.
I think that's an excellent insight to end our conversation on. As we're talking about teams, I want to thank my all-star team for joining me for this panel. So thank you, Sarbjeet, and thank you, Haviv, for joining us today and sharing your insights about no-code automation and cloud operations and security in 2023. To our audience, thank you for joining us, and thank you for submitting your audience questions. If you have any additional questions for Sarbjeet or Haviv, you can reach out to them on Twitter. Sarbjeet is at Sarbjeet Johal, and Haviv is at Haviv Roh on Twitter. Havivro. Also, please make sure to follow Blink at GetBlinkOps on Twitter, and we look forward to seeing you all for future webinars. Thank you all for joining us.